How we doing, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our final session of this week for our virtual elementary art classes with Samantha Dallett. Today we are doing our studio project, which will be our self-portrait drawings. And in the last video when I went over materials, I did say that you had an option to use markers or your paints in the background. So I hope that you came prepared with everything that you need. I still have a few things that I have to grab, and I will be showing you a photo of all of my supplies. For starters, we need to make sure we have our paper handy, so we have our paper to draw on, our pencil and our eraser so that we can map out and draw the faces with the option to get rid of some of our mistakes. We also want to make sure we have our crayons today, because our crayons, we will be using those to color and blend our faces. In the background, that is where you have your option. You have your option to use your acrylic or your watercolor paint or your markers. In the background, you can do a landscape, you can just do a fun design, you can do one solid color. But think about if you're using your acrylic paint or your watercolor paint, that you will also need your brush, your water cup, and a palette or paper plate so you can put your paints out on them. If you're using just your markers in the background today, that's totally okay as well. You do have that choice. And with your markers, you'll just have to come handy with them. So make sure you have everything in front of you that you need so we're not spending our time throughout today's class grabbing materials. And I'm going to set up mine now so I can show you everything that I have prepared. I don't want to spend too much more time getting prepared. We should have already come with all of our materials. But one thing I did not tell you to bring that you might have to leave your desk to go and get is either a photo of yourself or a mirror. Now I have my mirror back here. It is just a fun shaped mirror. So this is a mirror that I will be using, and I'm going to have that set up on my easel, and that will help me look at myself while drawing myself. I'll see my reflection in the mirror and I'm going to draw what I see. Now, if you have a mirror that you know you can use, or mom and dad said that you could use, maybe your siblings have a mirror that you could use, go ahead and grab that mirror now, and I'll give you just a moment to go and do that. Make sure we're careful that we don't break the mirrors. If you don't have access to a small mirror that you can bring over to your desk, if all your mirrors are attached to the walls in your house, then go ahead and try to find a photograph of yourself. I have this one here. This is an old picture of myself from when I had hair, but if I didn't have a mirror, I could always go ahead and draw from a photo, because you'll look the same as you do in your pictures. If you don't have a picture printed out, maybe you have a phone and you have a picture of yourself on a phone, on your mom's phone, or whatever it is, but try to find either a mirror so you can see your reflection, or a picture of yourself so you can look at that for reference. So instead of keeping my mirror up on my easel, I'm going to be drawing to the side. I need to make sure my mirror stays in front of me. So I'm actually going to hold my mirror here, so you can see it is still my mirror. I'm gonna hold it right in front of me as I try to draw what I see on my paper. I have my mirror, and I am going to start with the shape of my head. I'm going to do that now. So very quickly and very lightly, so that I can go ahead and erase some of these lines, I went in and I started with kind of like that light circle, but because I do have a little bit more squared chin area, I went ahead and I drew some diagonal lines so that these are going to act like that jawline, that squared off look that my face has, that might be different than what yours looks like. So I darkened up my lines just a little bit so you can see them better, and now I'm going to add that cross or that large T over my drawing, so that'll help me map out where my eyes, my nose, and my mouth need to go. Going back to looking in my mirror, I am going to start with my eyebrows. I want to make sure that once I have that T crossed and I add my 2 notches, I will be starting with my eyebrows. So that top notch, I just added mine. I am going to put my eyebrows near that line like we discussed and practiced in our last session together. But when I go back to my mirror and I'm looking at my mirror, I can see that this eyebrow kind of arches a little bit more than this side does. So if I wanted to have one eyebrow arched and maybe I wanted to be very abstract and goofy with one eyebrow, I could kind of go like this. Could I make a funny face in my mirror? Do I want to try to draw one eyebrow sticking up and one super flat? I can totally do it if I wanted to. That's something that you can choose to do. I'm going to do one eyebrow up and one eyebrow down to make it a little difficult, and I'm going to draw them in on my self-portrait now. I hope that you're working on your eyebrows now too. We should have already gotten past that first circle and mapping out our lines. Again, very quickly, I went in, I drew a shape that I thought looked like my eyebrow. Maybe if yours is more arched, you can do like a little caterpillar, or if yours is a little bit more squared like mine is right here, you can do a little point, almost like a little boomerang, as if you were drawing a boomerang or an upside down Nike check or something. So go ahead, draw those in, and if you want, shade them in just a very, very little, not a lot of pressure, but so that you know that these are my eyebrows. I'm going to make them just a little bit darker. Our next step is going to be our eyes. Now, for me, I decided to kind of do a funny face. I put one eyebrow down and I lifted one up just a little bit, which means this eye is bigger and this eye is kind of squinty. I have to draw that now. If that's the face I see in the mirror, or that's how I want to draw my face based on what I look like, I need to make sure I'm doing one squinty eye and one bigger eye so that I'm drawing what I'm seeing and it looks like what I want it to. So let's go ahead and move on to our eyes. Gotta make the face that I had. I have one slanted eyebrow here, and I'm going to do one small oval and one larger oval for my two eyes. We want to make sure that we're identifying super easy shapes that we know how to draw. This bigger eye ended up looking kind of like a diamond, and this squinty one was a very flat, stretched out oval. And once I have those shapes, I can then choose to draw the pupil or the colored part of my eye. If I have a wrinkle, if I'm doing the face that I made in my mirror, I have a wrinkle that runs right here. Maybe I want to draw those things. So now that I have my eyes drawn on there, they do kind of look a little funny right now, but we're gonna add color to those later, so they're really gonna start making sense soon. Our next step is going to be drawing our nose. I'm going to go back to my mirror and I'm going to draw what I see on my paper. Remember, an easy way to draw your nose could be kind of like a W, but with like those three little arches. So if you wanted to do something easy, we want to see where that cross is and move just below that cross for our nostrils, which is this underneath part. So if I wanted, I could do three little loops, like a W that has three little bumps. And then I'm going to go back to my mirror or back to that photo, and I'm going to try to see, is my nose, does it have a perfect little ball on the top? Do I have a little bump up here? Is my nose wider or smaller? Is it lower? Where is your nose, or how does your nose look? And see how you can draw it so that it looks like you and it doesn't look like anybody else. I do have a little circle on the top, so I'm going to put a little circle or a little like button look right here. I'm going to draw that circle right in the center bump, right in that center loop from that three bumped W that I put. I'm going to do a little circle there, and that's acting like this little top part of my nose. If I pinched it here, that would be that little circle. Now I went ahead and I just scribbled in those areas to make that darker, but I also want to make sure we talked about what our parentheses were. Again, if I wanted to write something in up here, these two side pieces, that would be my parentheses, that tiny little arch on both sides of something. So if I want you to draw the outside of your nose like your nostrils, similar to the way that you do a parentheses, then just add those tiny little arches on the side so it looks like there's shape. So I'm going to take it from that shaded area and just make a little parentheses. Moving on, I now am going to draw my mouth. All right, so I went ahead and I drew my mouth, but I didn't add much detail. Again, I focused on the shape that I could recognize. So if I face towards you and I keep my mouth closed, you can see that I have a little like divot or a point at the top, and then they arch down on both sides. My bottom lip is then kind of just like a swoop, like a little smile. You can kind of see where that little divot is compared to where I drew it. You can also see how that kind of just swoops under my bottom lip, and I drew it so that it just swooped under from one side to the next. Is my mouth, when I'm not moving, the same width as the top of my ear? And if it is, then we can go into our drawing, see how wide it is, and then that will be the length of our ear. So let's try it out. From point to point. That's about top to bottom. So your mouth side to side when rested is pretty close to the top and bottom of your ear. So if that's the case, go ahead and see how wide you drew your mouth. And then move your fingers to where your ears go. And again, make those two little notches. Once you have that size determined, you can see that it still lines up to the sides of our ears, or the sides of our ears still line up to the corner of our eyes and the bottom of our nose. So I have my mirror back up here, and I am going to draw my ears. I'm going to take it up just a little and put a little earlobe down at the bottom. Remember, these can be kind of like jelly bean shapes. They can be little parentheses. They can be just little bumps on the side, and you can draw them however you'd like, especially if you're playing around with abstracting the shape and size of your facial features. I'm gonna look at what my hair's doing. And again, very lightly and quickly, I'm just going to add some hair. I'm going to be coloring this in with crayons. So I don't need to be too worried on what it's looking like in pencil, because I'm going to erase some of these lines. I'm going to lighten them back up, and I'm going to add color to this picture. So that is very roughly a drawing of myself. You can see how I went in and really broke up each section as I mapped out my face. Now we are going to start adding color, and we are going to have a painted or colored in background with our markers. So I hope we didn't spend too much time drawing, but we are going to switch over and we're going to start blending our faces. So to start off, I went in with an eraser and I lightly removed some of my lines, just enough so that I could still see where the drawing was, but so that I didn't have that X running through my face or any unnecessary lines. I then started with a light peach color. I am lighter skinned, so I wanted to start with the lighter skin color. With that, I filled in everywhere that there is skin showing. So all over my face, my neck, and my ears got that first layer of peach applied very lightly. I then started to pick up a darker brown and I worked in some of those shadow areas. A lot of blending comes with layering and overlapping many different colors. So I started going back and adding some darker brown into more of those shadowy areas. And during this time, I was able to reshape the chin area and give the ears a little bit more definition. I followed up my hairline and I went around my face, going through some of those darker areas like around my hair, my cheekbones, the shadows you have underneath your eyebrows and around your eyes, and I started to layer in my crayons. You can see here that I chose to start using more fun colors. If you look at your skin, you can see that there are tints of pink and blue and maybe even some purple sometimes. So I like to be abstract with the colors that I use. And you can see here I used that blue and that pink color to really start to warm up my face. I decided to use the pink pretty freely. I put it kind of all over my face, but I stuck with keeping the blue in more of those darker areas. Using the pink and the blue and maybe even purple or green in your skin tone can help you look a little bit more realistic. Now, if you don't want to do this, you don't have to. You can stick to using more of those peaches and the browns and maybe a little bit of orange, but this is simply how I like to use my colors. You saw there that I even put yellow throughout the entire face. I'm now starting to outline or find some of those pencil lines that I might have lost as I was adding color, just so I don't forget where some of those shapes were. I can use that darker brown as kind of like an outline, and again, starting to push a little harder, I can start to make the areas around the nose and the eyes darker as the shadows require it. I'm using this brown to reshape my face, to add cheekbones, to add that little shadow or line by my chin, and I've also started to create depth or space in this image simply by creating darker values in certain areas. You can see that the neck is much darker because of the pressure I've been using and the amount of colors I've placed there. The darkness of the neck area or by my ears causes those sections to look farther away, allowing the chin to look much closer and almost like it's poking out, where the neck is sat farther back and there is a shadow casted. I've now picked up a few different colors and I'm going to start working into the hair. Now I have a darker blonde hair color, or some might call it a lighter brown hair color. It's kind of in between the two. So I started with my black crayon to add some layering and some depth to that top area, and I just wanted to darken it up very quickly. I then went back in with all those different browns that I had, again layering my colors and creating a lot of energy in this area. Now I styled my hair so that the front kind of sticks up. So when you saw me using those up and down vertical lines at the top, you can see me doing this now. It is creating the energy or the effect that my hair is kind of stuck up and pushed upward. I also went ahead and took this dark purple and I wanted to treat this almost like a black crayon. I can use this dark purple in my hair to really make it look much darker, but without it looking very plain by just using a solid black crayon. Again, I'm thinking about layering my colors and using as many as I can, because the more they overlap, the darker the value will be and the more energetic my painting will look because of all of the use of colors. I also went back into the lips and I picked up another pink, a little darker than the one I was using in my skin tones. I also chose kind of like an orangey red color, and I tried staying dark on one side and lighter on the other. Using this brown, I added a little bit more of a shadow in between my lips and I outlined them just a little bit more while also going back in there with that purple and outlining a few of the other facial features that I have as well, like my chin, my nose, and a little bit of those shadows by my eyes. I now am going into the eyes that I have, and I started with just doing that small little black dot that we all have in the center of our eyes. I have hazel eyes, which is kind of like a mix between brown and green. So I chose one light green and one light brown, and I used both of those in that small circular area of my eye to create the colored section. Again, I chose a much darker blue. This isn't the same purple I used. It's a very dark blue, but I'm using that blue to outline instead of a black. So again, it's not looking as harsh if I were to have used pure black to outline these features. Moving between the browns and the blues, as I finish up my portrait, I want to make sure I color in my eyebrows because I drew them kind of funky, so I want to make sure that I don't forget to color them in. I chose a brown, that dark blue, and dark purple to do in the eyebrows, and again took that dark blue to outline the rest of my features so that they don't seem so lost. I finished up my portrait with adding a black shirt at the bottom so it matches the shirt I have on today. So we are about to start the background of our pieces, but if you are still coloring or blending in the faces, go ahead, take your time and work at your own pace. I am going to continue though for the sake of our time together so that you can at least see me work on my background. Now I will be using my acrylic paints, so I have my paint, my palette, and some water put out for me, so I'm already ready to go ahead and start painting. If you are choosing to do your markers, at any point you can go ahead and start working on your background once you have finished coloring in yourself. If you are using a paint, make sure you decide if it's watercolor or your acrylics. Make sure you have all of your materials, and let's go ahead and get started on that background together so that you can see how I finish up my piece. So I started by adding just a little bit of water to my brush so it kind of woke up those bristles at the end and it was ready to pick up some paint. Now, some of my paint kind of dried from when I showed you that I had my paint set up in the beginning of today's session, but the more I was able to add water to it, the more those colors kind of woke back up, similar to the way that our watercolors would have acted. So I started by adding just a little bit of a watered down green acrylic paint to kind of my neck and shoulder area because I wanted to start by doing a loose and abstracted landscape. So I started with just a little bit of that green, and now you can see that I've gone in with some of that darker blue so I can play with different values and have light and dark areas in that abstracted grass or forest area. I'm mixing my colors, and I'm not afraid if they kind of get a little messy and runny because I am trying to have fun and not paint a perfect, beautiful picture. In my mind, I still think it turned out beautifully, but again, I wanted to have more fun with the background, and I didn't want to take it as seriously as I took the drawing of my portrait, which I did keep a little bit more realistically. I did have a little bit of white in that far section of my palette, so I've watered down some of my blue, and I've incorporated that into the white as I mix them together to get a very baby blue color as I started to fill in the sky. I wasn't afraid of overlapping some of the paint with my crayons because the crayons aren't going to get watered down, or they're not going to blend or bleed into the colors that I have in the background. So if you have just a little bit of paint that hits some of your crayon area, that's totally okay. You can see I moved very quickly through this process because I really wanted to get the color on there and not worry about if it was perfect in terms of somebody else's opinion. I really wanted to have fun. So I watered down those colors. I really let them blend and bleed together. Again, you can see I'm almost nearly overlapping the top of my hairline. So I now have picked up some of that red, and I don't really know what I was trying to do here. Again, I really was just having some fun. I loved being able to see how that watered down red or colors behind it that were still watery, blended and pulled those colors. You could see the red kind of merging into that watery background that I still had on there. I've now watered down my brush and I've cleaned it off with just some regular old water, and I don't have any really paint or any color on my brush, but I took that water and I kind of just blended it around some of the hairline so it darkened up and pulled some of those colors together. But as you can see, it didn't take the crayon off of my piece of paper. It kind of just mushed them together a little bit, and I thought it looked cool. I then took a red and my blue, and I didn't really lighten it at all. I wanted it to stay really dark, and I added that to the t-shirt that I had at the bottom, and you can see me now going back in and kind of adding some paint lines on top of the actual portrait so that the darkness in the background matches the darkness that I have in the portrait, which is much closer to me than whatever the trees or grass is that's set behind me. So I'm sure you guys are still working on your backgrounds, but feel free to continue working as I go over what I just did with mine. I wanted to stay very loose and very fun and abstract in the background. And as you saw, I even watered down my acrylics a lot, so they kind of acted like our watercolors. You can choose between your watercolors, your acrylics, or your markers, but I want you to think about doing something fun or creative or random. Whatever you want to do in the background is totally your choice, but you can see that I added kind of like grass or some little like trees. Maybe it's a forest really, really far away and you see just the tops of the trees. So I have something like that working in the background. And then the top, I kind of just mixed a little bit of that yellow and the blue and that white that I had available. And I lightly put a background color. And then I really had some fun by watering down my red and some of that darker blue and really just kind of dropping and spreading all of those colors around. I feel like I kind of have almost like a melting rainbow falling around my face, but I think it turned out really cool. And if I were to sit still and make that face, it kind of looks like me. So now that you see me compared to my self-portrait, I have her here. The head is almost, it might even be bigger than my head. I think I might have drew it a little bit larger than what I am normally in real life, but I loved how my portrait came out. It kind of looks a little funky. I made a weird face. I used really abstract and weird colors in the actual skin tones and in the background. So I hope you are finishing up. I hope you're working on your background and you're having as much fun as I've had today. Now we are coming up on the last, I think, 2 minutes of class. So if you are finished, this is your time to start cleaning up. Remember, if you use paint, you want to make sure that your brush is cleaned off in clean water and that your palette doesn't dry and stay that way, that you want to make sure that you clean it off as well. Now, if you used a paper plate or something that isn't reusable, just go ahead, throw your palette away, clean up your desk area, and make sure that your crayons find their way back to their home and that everything is nice and neat once you've finished. I have to do that now because I did make a little bit of a mess doing the background of my piece. I also will be showing you just a close-up picture at the end of today's video of my portrait, but I think my self-portrait looks a little bit like me, and I've had a blast making these pictures with you today. I hope you're having fun, I hope you're finishing up, and please remember to clean up your mess once you have finished your project. I'll show you a picture of my portrait right now, but I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day, and I'll catch you here next time.